Hey ghouls and creeps, I'm Britt, and welcome to my channel where we do spooky, DIY, home, and lifestyle content all year long. I've been noticing some trends when it comes to Halloween and dark aesthetic decor the last couple years, and those include two-dimensional wall decor that has three-dimensional elements and floral and bone motifs that you can find on and as nearly everything. Continuing along this thought thread, I began to contemplate what a hybrid would look like of these two trends for a piece of DIY decor, which brings us to the project for this video. Today we're going to be taking on the simple task of cutting a skeleton in half lengthwise and adhering said skeleton along with some wilting fall blooms to a plywood panel to create a 2D but also a 3D wall decor piece. I've already purchased the plywood, the 24-inch skeleton, napkins, and floral bushes that I'll need for this project, which leaves spray paint, so let's go pick that up. One of my favorite art supply stores in Portland, Oregon is Artist and Craftsman Supply. They have all the crafting essentials as well as the more niche fine art supplies like linoleum blocks, leather paints, and airbrushing supplies, to name a few. Today though, I'm here for the extensive selection of Montana Gold spray paint. After looking at my 24-inch skeleton closer, I was super happy to realize that there is actually a seam in most areas where I was intending to cut so that it sits flush with the board surface. There was just a couple areas where I would have to make my own cuts, like the back of the skull, the ribs below the pre-made seam, and the heels. The shoulders, arms, spine, and tailbone all had seams, so it was just a matter of unscrewing these areas to separate the two halves. For the areas that needed cuts to be made, I used a permanent marker and made lines as level as I could with the skeleton's separating seam. Then I began removing a lot of the screws in the front of the spine and some of the screws in the shoulder blades and tailbone. The screws inside the rib cage on the front of the spine were a little tricky to remove with the Phillips screwdriver I had available, but I was able to extend the tip from the handle and negotiate it through the rib bones. Plastic for the skeleton was more rigid and dense than I thought it would be. I was able to use crafting shears to carefully cut through the rib bones and most of the skull, but for this I would probably recommend more legit shears or a cutting tool. I found that the plastic at the skull's base was a whole lot thinner than the plastic up at the crown of the head. I tried to cut a wedge out of the skull's back to have better access with the shears, but I ultimately decided to use the miter saw to complete the cut. There were some spots where the screw holes extended past the seam, so I simply sanded these areas down and cleaned up the cuts I made with the shears. I decided to shave down the heel bones because I didn't want the feet to stick out super far from the board surface, but by cutting them at a 45-ish degree angle, they'll only stick out like 1 3/4 inches. There were some screw holes that stuck out on the tailbone, so I just sanded these down as well. Before gluing anything to my plywood panel, I made sure to attach my hanging hardware, 2 brackets for the horizontal orientation and 1 for the vertical orientation. After verifying the length of my board and skeleton, I laid my skeleton out on the panel and determined where I wanted the coffin outline to be. In the end, I decided to have the coffin ends and the widest part of the sides 3 inches in from the edges of the board. I made reference marks before removing the skeleton parts just so I knew where things needed to be placed during the gluing process. I had purchased this Gorilla construction adhesive for a different project and thought it would work perfectly for adhering my skeleton to the plywood. After about 10 minutes of holding the skull and spine in place and not seeing any signs of the adhesive curing, I abandoned ship and switched to hot glue. I may have been too impatient with the construction adhesive, but I'm glad I switched my adhesive choice just for the sake of dry time being a whole lot shorter. It should be sticking like within 10 minutes, but I used the hot glue to fill the screw holes, which worked mostly. In hindsight, I think a wood filler or caulk would have given a better end result. I then plucked my flowers and leaves from their bush stems and snipped the backs so they would lay flush with whatever surface I glued them to. Before gluing the flowers in place, I took time to arrange them in their final resting places and decided to paint the leaves with a white acrylic so that they didn't require as many coats of the spray paint later. To add some texture to the board surface, I took some party napkins and peeled the layers apart so that they were single ply and decoupaged them to the board. While the decoupaged areas dried, I painted the wood around the decoupaged areas and the coffin perimeter so that I didn't have as much painting and dry time for this step later. After 24 hours of dry time, the decoupage sections were dry, which meant I got to paint these areas, followed by more dry time, taping and papering off the perimeter to spray paint the coffin, skeleton, and flowers. This painter's tape did not stick super well, which as a makeshift solution I had planned to hold down the paper and tape as I painted and resist spraying near the edges at an angle to avoid overspray. And then I realized that Ben Gibbard had it all wrong, and the sound of settling is actually the sound of painter's tape removing itself before you've gone and painted, and you opt to use it anyway and not go buy proper painter's tape. I think you can guess what happened with all the foreshadowing. I did get overspray, so I had to go get better painter's tape and repaint some of the black perimeter. Although there were a fair amount of hiccups involved in the making of this project, I felt that the effort and the time were totally worth it, and I'm excited to show you how it turned out. Please let me know in the comments if you're also a fan of the bone and floral motifs, and if this project got you thinking of wall decor in a different way. Next week we'll be diving straight into the Halloween content with a Halloween decor DIY video, followed by a decorate with me for Halloween video, so be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out. Thank you as always for visiting my creepy craft corner of the internet and watching till the end. Now let's get to that grand reveal.